How we all doing tonight? Jack here. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you are having a fantastic evening as always. And today I wanted to talk about just the communication that we're receiving from Criterion about Need for Speed Unbound and the end of Volume 6 going into Volume 7. As you know, Volume 7 is coming out very soon, but the Kaizen team over at EA have just given us a end of volume report for Volume 6. Now, this is something that I personally feel is a massive just improvement in terms of just communication from the development team to the Need for Speed community, and it's still something I have to pinch myself about because we're not used to having this type of communication when it comes to Need for Speed. We're not used to having just the developers kind of talking to us about each update, what they liked, what they didn't like, and what they want to improve on, and what they think they can add, what they can't add. Like, the amount of communication that we're getting from Criterion and just the Need for Speed team in general is probably the most we've ever gotten. I remember times, and even back earlier in Unbound's lifespan, like earlier when the game was out, there'd be periods of like absolute silence where you wouldn't hear anything from the team, you wouldn't hear anything about updates, and everyone just assumed that the game was dead. You know, there was a period after the game came out in early 2023 when everyone just assumed that it was gonna be one update and done, like Need for Speed Heat. And there were so many times, so many periods where after a game's lifespan was over, usually after 6 months with like Payback in 2015, that the dev team would just go absolute radio silence for like a year, and we wouldn't hear anything about it. So actually seeing and getting this type of communication from Need for Speed and the Need for Speed team Criterion is absolutely just awesome to see. And we're going to talk about this. I'm not going to read everything here. I'll leave the link to this down below in the description, because a lot of it is just taking what the top feedback was on different platforms such as Twitter or Instagram and basically responding to it in a very open way. And they're very open about this in this volume here. So they start off here with an infographic basically showing all the different data that they collected from Volume 6, such as the busiest day people were out racing, the different times people were racing around in different time zones. Like, for example, in the United States where I am, 8 to 10 p.m. is usually when everyone was on, and in Australia played hella this update, same as South Korea. And then they also listed the top 3 cars with hours driven, and people love the S5. The S5 is actually pretty surprisingly the most played car. I thought it would have been the R8, but the S5 takes that. The R8 comes second, and then you have the Eclipse GSX down below. Fantastic car, by the way. I have a really nice build of the GSX. And then they also listed the top PvP playlists here with the RS6 Rush, the S Plus Specials, and the Need for Speed. So seeing all this data is hella cool. It's always really cool to see like what people are doing the most and just like what's happening with the game. I would like to see more info like this, and then obviously they ask like, what would you like to see in our kind of like info dumps here? What type of data would you like to see? And down here they basically start off with, the majority of your feedback won't be addressed during this year of live service. We're a small team on a tight schedule and are working hard to bring you everything we've promised. We'll make updates and refine features where possible, but most of this feedback is collective to inform how we approach things in the future. And right off the bat, this is something you just gotta address right out the bat. I'm so glad that they're doing this. For those of you who don't know, the vast majority of Criterion's team is siphoned off to work on the next Battlefield game, which I am not a big fan of. I mean, I love Battlefield like as a franchise, but the last couple of games were just not good. 2042 was awful. So the Criterion going off to work on Battlefield, I'm not a huge fan of. I wish they could continue to work on Need for Speed as a full team, but thankfully they still have a team, a very small team dedicated, working on Unbound, and hopefully the next game too. I hope that they're still working on that just a little, just kind of updating it every once in a while. Matt, they're not miracle workers. They have a very tight team, a very small team, and they have a very tight schedule. So right off the bat, they're trying to kind of ground things in reality, and they already promised a lot with the roadmap, so they have a lot of work. They're going to be bringing a lot of content to this game over the next year, so I'm already like content with what they promised so far, and knowing the reality of things, the fact that they have a small dedicated team and that they're just open and honest about it, right off the bat, I think that's a really good move. We will only be including feedback in these reports that relates to what we're doing in Unbound. There are certain frequent community requests, I think we all know what we're talking about here, that are outside the scope of this project, and making any short statement about them would be unhelpful. So right off the bat, they're just setting it straight, like, hey, like there's a certain amount of feedback that we need that is realistic that we want to take, and they're pretty open about their feedback too. They have, like, despite all that, they're still very open about their feedback. So they're talking about a smoother experience for when wanting to switch PvP playlist or going to PvP to free roam. Both require a full sign out and back into our online services, and it's incredibly slow. It's a big vibe killer. And then they responded that they changed the flow a little bit already, which they have. They've improved it a little, but it's still very wonky swapping from PvP. You have to basically sign out, get your whole lobby back in, your party back in, and then go into free roam or vice versa. And they're looking into what could be done in a possible update. So this is all feedback that they're hearing, which is very good. We saw lots of positive sentiment around PvP update. There were a few replies about how PvP switching flow and asking for a checkpoint system to be a little more forgiving, closer to Heat's version, whereby your speed is maintained when spawning or larger in size. I think the checkpoint system should just be just a tad bit larger. For the most part, I think the checkpoint systems are fine, but there is just that there are those checkpoints where you'll just kind of scrape by and it doesn't trigger, and you're like, okay, like what was that, you know? Checkpoints and reset speed are something we could do, but it could also have a serious knock-on effect for people who are used to playing, and we'll take a closer look in the future, but likely won't touch this year. And this is a big thing that, and I might just be reading too much into this, but they said this year because of risks involved. Does this mean that they're planning on supporting Unbound for another year after this? Again, I'm probably just reading too much into it, but that's a very interesting, the way they worded this is very interesting. This year, that's very interesting. But again, I'm just super happy that they're just open about it, and they're like, we're not doing anything now, but we do want to touch it. We do want to look at it in the future. And again, I'm not going to read all of these. I'm just going to kind of pick and choose what I thought was like really interesting from this blog post. And then here we go. This is a major ask that I would like. This is a little bit of a complaint of mine. A PvP where their race route is not shown before a race, and they wrote that this is something we've been looking into, but unfortunately is one of those things that seems easy but isn't. That being said, we're still investigating how we can make some changes here. We understand that you want to know the best car from your arsenal that will dominate the route ahead. Again, this is something I seriously hope they're able to figure out and implement. Again, I don't know how the game's coded. I don't know how many layers are stacked on top of like the PvP mode, or how much they had to like reverse engineer PvP mode into the game. Because like when you think about it, they can't just add a JPEG of like the lap layout, but you know, again, we don't know how they coded it. We don't know how many layers they built upon it, or like how many, you know, and with the small team that they have, you know, it might not be as easy as we all think it would be. But again, them coming out and just being honest about it, I think that's the best route that we could take, as opposed to just letting it out in the open, not addressing it, and then us wondering, wow, they can't add route layouts to this. What are they doing, you know? So I'm glad that they're being open and upfront about it. This person asked for more tight intercity racing in lower class N cars, so like B class and A class, and then they responded with, you will definitely see some underground themed playlists for volume 7. We're definitely gonna see some underground themed playlists for volume 7. This is really cool, and I hope, and B class and A class is some of my favorite races, like racing like classes in Unbound, so I can't wait to see more like use of the city portion of the map, because I do think at sometimes the city is a little underutilized. Not as much as like Need for Speed Paybacks was, but I still think that there should be some more races in the city. So I'm glad that they're adding this in Need for Speed Underground, in Underground themed update in Volume 7. Here's a very good one. Personally, I think every time you level up, maybe the cars should be unlocked instead of having to do really monotonous challenges for them that are enough levels for them all to be unlocked. So please change the way the regular cars are unlocked in Lakeshore Online. I'm very kind of mixed on this. There are some challenges that I think are fun, where you have to do a certain amount of races in a specific car brand in order to unlock a car. I think those are fine in the sense that they kind of force you out of your comfort zone a little to build cars that you typically wouldn't, that are maybe off meta, or, you know, cars you wouldn't regularly choose. It's definitely gotten me out of my comfort zone with these cars, but I understand why people would rather just unlock them like just straight up right out of the gate. But then there are some challenges that I think really should be removed, especially the ones that require you to literally grief people and unlock the cars. Like I want to drive my Hellcat, but in order to do that I have to like crash out like a certain amount of racers in a race. So I basically just have to grief people to to unlock these cars, and that's not something I really want to do. So that's something I hope they can change. Maybe change it to a different type of challenge, or just remove that challenge requirement entirely. And that's the last kind of like major one I wanted to talk about. They talk about licensing. Someone asked for the soundtracks for the 90s Need for Speed games, and then they talked about licensing and how like that licensing is a bitch, which it basically is. The other main request regarding this topic is the feedback that must not be named that we've already said we won't be addressing in this particular blog. Thank you so much for being part of this journey. We continue to build towards the ultimate Need for Speed experience in one place for the first time. We hope that we've accurately captured your feedback here, but if you disagree, then feel free to hit us up on Instagram or Twitter, head over to the community run subreddit or Discord channels. See you on May 21st for the launch of Volume 7 Drift and Drag. So this feedback, I'm just excited. I'm super excited about Volume 7. I'm just glad that we're actually getting proper communication when it comes to Need for Speed, and just that we're actually like hearing things from the team and that they're being open and honest about it. And I think that's the best thing we can get right now with Need for Speed. Unfortunately, Criterion's not in the best spot when it comes to the amount of people that they have working on the game. Most of their team is unfortunately working on Battlefield, but with what they have, they're doing a lot of awesome things, and I'm glad that they're coming out and being open and honest and just in this type of way. But that's it for me tonight. What do you guys think about this? Be sure to leave your comments down below in the comment section. But that's it for me tonight. I will catch you all later. Have a good night, everyone.